All right, we are live, baby. We already have San Antonio. We already have Pakistan. Welcome in, everybody. As you know, I like to go and retweet my live stream on all my socials once I start. So while everybody's filtering in, if you guys want to throw up where you're from, it has been almost a week since my last episode, my last live stream. Been very busy, doing a lot of stuff. So I apologize for the lack of content, but we are here tonight. So let's get it done. All right, live now. All right, there we go. All right, we got Miami, Macedonia. Nice, guys. Nice. Australia, Tucson, Toronto. Finished hitting legs today. Awesome, man. Was it more of a quad focus or more of a hamstring glute focus? All over legs. I did legs yesterday. I'm hip thrusting 6 plates now on the like on a bar, so that's pretty cool. What is that, like 585, something like that for my hip thrusts for 3 sets of 12? So that's sort of where I'm at. Stockholm, Wales. Awesome, boys. Awesome. Okay. All right, well, I guess we can go ahead and get it started. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. This is episode 124 of the Kalibrated live show with your host, of course, the one, the only, the slow, the steady, the Scott. We have quite a bit to talk about today. There's a ton of updates, so we're going to get right into that. There's also, it is a very turbulent time right now in Ukraine, in the world, obviously, but particularly in Ukraine. We've seen this sort of stable situation for the past 2 years, more or less, since the end of Istanbul, Kharkov, Kherson. After that, we've seen this very stable sort of situation in Ukraine, both politically and militarily. It hasn't been too rough. We are now getting to the point where both the military and political situation in Ukraine are becoming extremely desperate. And I've been talking about this collapse, and I'm going to do another collapse post on Twitter here in a couple of days when Kurakhove falls. That's the next big objective I was waiting for before I did that post. We're on day like 120 or something now of my collapse series. And since then, the Ukrainians have lost Ugledar. Chasiv Yar is almost entirely captured by the Russians now. Toretsk has a majority of that is now controlled by the Russians. Kharkov region is moving very quickly. The Kursk salient is now less than 50% of what it was at its max. So it has shrunk by half what the Ukrainians control. The Russians are pushing in there. The North Koreans are apparently there. We've still not seen really any significant evidence of North Koreans. We've seen a couple of videos that have, an undisclosed location, which is supposedly a field hospital with a bunch of Asian people walking around with limps. Could be in Kursk. I'm not sure. No, like I said, no geolocation was given. And then the only other real context we have evidence we have for North Koreans is some pictures from a drone, but we've seen the Ukrainians put Asian faces onto other pictures and try to pass them off as North Korean soldiers in Ukraine. So I'm skeptical of those. I'm not saying that there aren't North Koreans in the region, but whatever's happening, the Kursk salient is now shrinking for the Ukrainians. Not really a very good thing when that's basically the only good PR thing going for them right now. And as we're slowly reaching this point where it's going to be nothing but L's for Ukraine, and I would say that it's been nothing for L's for Ukraine for like the last year and a half, but now it's getting to the point where they can't even fake wins anymore. ATACMS and Storm Shadow strikes are happening maybe once every week or so. Not significant enough to do any long-term damage, not significant enough to put the Russians on the back foot, but just significant enough to cause an escalation and force the situation in a direction where Trump might not be able to pull out of Ukraine, which is the goal. That's what's coming up right now. So when I'm talking about Ukraine being in a very turbulent situation. The Ukrainian regime is at it's nearing its end, and I don't mean that in like a they're going to go away right when Trump gets into office or anything like that. They're just in a situation where they're losing their primary political, ally in the Biden administration. Once that Biden administration is moved out, the entire equation changes for Ukraine. So what Ukraine needs to do right now is try to put something into motion that makes it so Trump has to be a Ukrainian ally, or Europe has to be a Ukrainian ally. Without that, the regime is going to die. Ukraine is going to be swallowed up, and it's going to be a very, very rough go of it for the people who are in power in Ukraine, at least. And that's what they have to try to avoid. Just thinking about it from a purely pro-Ukrainian perspective, what is the thing that Zelensky has to do? He has to escalate. He has to get the Russians into a position where they are incapable of negotiating with the West, and he has to put Ukraine in a position where it is geostrategically vital for the United States, which is a very difficult thing to do. What I expect over the next couple of weeks is a rampant escalation in assassinations, large, gatherings being targeted, and more deep strikes with ATACMs and Storm Shadows on highly, highly sensitive, maybe not even important, but highly sensitive targets that basically put the Russians in a position where their hands are tied. That's what I'm expecting over this next 30 or so days. So buckle up. It's going to be turbulent. But for right now, we will just go ahead and go over and look at the map. All right. Again, welcome everybody in. If you do not follow me, if you do not follow me on Telegram or Twitter, you can, If you do not follow me on Telegram or Twitter, you can go find those links in the description of this video. You can also find my Patreon account. I do have videos that I need to upload. They're just kind of sitting in a bank waiting to be uploaded on Patreon, and I'm sorry for all my Patreon supporters. I care about you guys a lot. You're going to get a bunch of content all at once. Like I said, I've just been very busy. So go check those out. Free content on all of those places. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into the map updates, shall we? Okay, so in the Kursk region, my map is now more or less accurate to what the reality on the ground is in terms of the Ukrainian front line. For a long time, I said that the Kursk region map was off because it didn't account for gray zones, which there were huge gray zones, and it didn't necessarily account for every position that the Russians held and the Ukrainians held, and it just because it was the fog was so heavy over this region for a long time. Now we have a lot more geolocations, a lot more videos coming out, and we can see where the Russians have pushed in. I have made some small adjustments, but nothing serious. And this is how the situation more or less looks now. So my Kursk area map is more or less accurate to the ongoing situation. All right, moving down here to the Kharkov region, there are no updates. Moving over here to the Oskil River region, the Russian crossing near Zapadne has expanded. It has expanded along the R79 highway here, which is north of Kupiansk. It is a highway that is going to lead directly into Kupiansk, and it is likely the route in which Kupiansk will be captured from the north here, pushing down and then surrounding the city. And forcing the Ukrainians to withdraw, which will include this entire pocket, as well as probably most of this. That I don't know when necessarily that's going to happen. It really depends on how hard the Russians push. But as you can see, the Russian armed forces have crossed the Oskil and have advanced into Kurakhove, as well as in the direction of Zapadne. So this bridgehead is now likely not going to be pushed back by the Ukrainians. The Russians do have a very strong foothold here now, and they're going to continue to press that advantage for as long as they can. All right. Moving down to the Kharkov and Luhansk Oblast border along the Oskil here, Russian armed forces have advanced south through the Kharkov area and have also captured the small town of Lazovo and have progressed north of Zeleny High here. So as you can see, this entire pocket is becoming more and more pressured. The situation is getting more and more difficult for the Ukrainians in this region. And remember, the logistics here are incredibly difficult. They're in the low ground of the river, and they have to run logistics along a single road and then single roads that run into the territory that's actually being held. So this is a very difficult position, a difficult bridgehead for the Ukrainians to hold, and they're still holding it. And like I've said for months, I thought that the proper way of doing business was to back out over the Oskil, set up a defensive line along the river, which is much more defensible, and then from there, focus on the other areas like southern Donetsk with the available manpower that you now have that is not defending open fields across into a bridgehead. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But a lot of the things that the Ukrainians have done this war have not made a lot of sense to me, including the significant number of encirclements we've seen. I actually am going to show you guys a photo from AMK mapping here in a second, where he shows all of the encirclements that have taken place in southern Donetsk over the last 2 months. It's pretty wild. Hot pockets indeed. Indeed. Let's go south now. All right. Into Toretsk, we have 2 Russian advances, one here in the direction of this mine and Terikon region. This is likely one of the last strong defensive locations for the Ukrainians in Toretsk, and they will try to hold this with everything they have, because after that, it's really not much until you get to Konstantinivka. If Konstantinivka is reached, this entire pocket here to the south is going to become completely untenable. The Ukrainians will be forced to retreat out of this pocket. And then, the operation to surround Pokrovsk from the north and cut the highway here that runs north of Pokrovsk will begin. That's going to put the entire salient, it's not really a salient, the entire region here into a very difficult situation for the Ukrainians. And remember, this is the end of the fortified lines, right? This is where they end. You can see that the Russians have just busted out this direction since they made it through a majority of the solidly fortified lines. The second advance in Toretsk is just a small advance out on these 2 Terikons. From these 2 Terikons into this suburban area right here. So not a major advance, but again, sets up a situation where there are some fortified areas. You can see them right here. Actually, maybe you can't see them. No. But there are some fortified lines here and in this tree line, I believe, and stuff like that. So once this falls, the push into Shcherberinivka and Novospassky will be much quicker. All right. Remember, guys, if you have any questions, you can always ask them through Super Chats. I always put those up on the screen. And if you just want to throw it up, a question, I might come back over and see it, but I don't have my chat up in front of my face. So, all right, on to the Pokrovsk section, guys. This is where a majority of the updates are coming from. This is where a majority of the Russian offensive operations are being conducted right now. So just south of Pokrovsk here, just north of Shevchenko, Russian forces have advanced up to the tree lines outside of Pishane and have likely entered this industrial facility to the south. This industrial facility is actually going to be a very important position for the Russians, as they will be able to use it to begin launching operations into the small towns just south of Pokrovsk, which are basically a part of the city. And once the battle for the city begins in earnest here, it's going to be incredibly hard to maintain these defensive fortifications on the outside. I do expect that the Russians are going to do a massive push here very soon to compromise these lines, as well as push back towards Udachny back here and further compromise logistics into Pokrovsk. This is my prediction. I think that around Christmas time, New Year's, you will see these settlements right here Lysivka, Zeleny, Novoukrayinka, and then Chushini. All of these right here, Sukyar as well, will be captured, and the Russians will be basically at the edge of the city. And then I don't necessarily think they're going to just enter the city and fight for it. I think the more appropriate way to do this is to push back here where there are no defensive fortifications. And we're actually going to talk about a Ukrainian report from this region here in just a second. All right. So to the north of Shevchenko, like I said, the Russians have advanced through these fields. And the Ukrainian report, I will actually read it to you guys here. Let me scroll down. All right. So I can put it on the screen as well. This is just from a Ukrainian telegram, but it is a Ukrainian telegram that is consistently has information about the front line. So take it for what it's worth. I tend to believe it just because of the situation around Pokrovsk right now. All right. So this is a translation too, so it's not really super. I mean, it's not like linguistically accurate, but from the Pokrovsk direction, the boys got in touch. The Russians are trying to bypass Pokrovsk and will get onto the highway to Kotelino. We were transferred to the Toretsk direction there too. They climb through the fields and covered 3 kilometers in 2 days. So I'm going to show you exactly what they're talking about, that 3 kilometers. There is no one to hold it. There are no people, no more mortarmen and pilots enter the battle. So what they're saying is artillerymen and people that just basically should not be on the front line because they're of higher value. They're not necessarily infantries of high value right now. They need infantry, so they're taking these people with training for other, MOSs. That's just what I'll call it. Means of service are being thrown into infantry, which is not a good sign. It's more difficult to train mortarmen and pilots for sure. Let's see. This is just some kind of fucked up is happening. There is no prepared lines of defense, which is exactly what I was talking about. The guys are thrown right into the bare forest and they are stormed. So what they're saying is that usually in the tree lines around a place, there are trenches and dugouts and all of this stuff to defend these tree lines. It's why it's like everybody watches the Russians capture a field and I'll make a big deal about it. I'll be like, this field is super important because it's a massive fortified line. And now the Ukrainians have to step back and everybody's like, it's just the Russians got another field. Now the tree lines are flat. The Ukrainians are just using them for like hedgerow cover basically at this point. And when this starts happening, the casualties skyrocket. So no prepared defenses. The guys are just being thrown out into these tree lines to hold them. They're getting riddled by artillery and FPVs, and then that's why the Russians are advancing so fast now. The guys are thrown right into battle bare forest. They don't have time to dig themselves any shelter, like what I said. No one is pulling together. Neither the pilots nor the artillery. The work directions have been torn apart. We simply don't have time to fly even for observations. So what they're saying is that the artillerymen and what I believe they're saying is drone pilots are not communicating well, and they don't have time to fly their drones and call in artillery and actually hold positions because the front line is moving so fast. And this is exactly what I was referring to about probably like 2 months ago. I was talking about how the Russians are advancing so fast now that if they get 5 kilometers deep, and the Ukrainians are off foot, the drone crews don't have stable positions to set up and operate drone operations. So once that is manipulated, once the battlefield has changed to the point where drones aren't flying in the same organized pattern, their defense collapses because they don't have the artillery to hold defensive lines. What has been holding defensive lines for the Ukrainians is FPVs. That whole situation is changing. Also, China has now, or did a couple weeks ago, stopped transferring commercial drones to Ukraine. So now it's going to be much more difficult for the West to buy drones than to send to Ukraine. and this is just another degradation of the AFU. And you can I mean, this is their words. They're talking about it. So the weather conditions are not in our favor. The drones are simply falling from the wind and rain. Yeah, which is another thing. When the winter comes and the storms are heavy and the cloud cover's thick, drone operations are much more difficult. Same with aviation operations. And the and like I said, the only thing holding these lines is FPV operators. If they're gone, right, or if they're not active, the Russians can move around much more freely. Whereas they used to get hit by artillery and stuff. All right, back over to the map. So I'm going to talk about exactly what I just referenced. And this is what they're talking about. So this area right here into Vovkov is the 3 kilometers in 2 days that they're talking about crossing open fields. So right here, 3 kilometers, 1.4 miles. Is or 1.6 miles, something like that, is the is exactly what they're talking about. The Russians have likely made it into this village and captured this village and are now looking at the T0406 highway here. So this is very, very bad because this is the main connection from Pokrovsk to Dnepro and Zaporozhye. So this is like one of the major highways in the region right here. And this is the highway that the Russians are going to take to, and even that, I mean, it's still so small. This is a highway right here. Highway, guys. This is the road situation in Ukraine. It's a single lane road. It's like Route 66 out here. And then this highway up here, which is slightly bigger, but still only 4 lanes, will be the one that will be under serious pressure after the Russians enter into Kotilin and Udachny right here. So you can see how the situation is just worsening day by day by day. The situation is getting worse for the Ukrainians. And over here, they have no prepared defenses. So the guys are just getting thrown into these tree lines and just told to sit. And they're getting hammered, and then their casualties are so much higher. So yeah, I don't know what the Ukrainian goal is now. They're still just trying to hold on to everything, but the situation is getting quite untenable. I mean, all the way around. The Russians are already west of Pokrovsk. That's pretty crazy to talk about. When we were saying, like I was saying, by Christmas, the Russians might be in Pokrovsk fighting, 6 months ago or so. Maybe not 6 months ago, 4 months ago, when the Russians were over here and they were pushing towards Pokrovsk. I was like, maybe eventually they'll get in, but you see all these defenses right here that's going to be very strong. The Russians just said, nah, we're going to take Selidove and then push it to the south and just go where there's no defenses. So it worked. And now the Russians are looking at a much more favorable battlefield situation out over here. And it's only going to get worse from here for the Ukrainians. And once Pokrovsk and Minhorod fall, I think that will be the go time for the Russians, because there's just nothing out here. There's literally nothing. You're looking at the title of today's episode, A Tale of Two Encirclements. When we look at these encirclements that are going on, Pokrovsk, Kurakhove, and Velyka Novosilka are the last 3 defensive points on this line, basically before the river. And that's a very, very, very bad situation for the Ukrainians to be in. They know it's coming. It's why they're beginning to talk about negotiations, but it's not. There's just no real proper way for the Ukrainians to get out of this situation right now, at least the current Ukrainian regime. All right, so just here, this is the Novotrotsky area where they said that they were getting sent to. The Russians have advanced into Novovasilivka here, which they will just begin town hopping, as I talked about months ago. They're gonna hop from Novovasilivka to Uspenivka, down here to Novo Alexandrivka, all the way down, all the Novos around here. And as I said, we have this giant area right here This yellow area, which I've talked about multiple times, this is where I made it. This is how far the Russians have advanced since I made this line. They are advancing exactly how I expected them to, and they are pushing along the northern part of the Solona River right here, and then down here along the Vavocha River. So the two low grounds with the only reasonable high ground, but most of it's just flat, so it's not even really a high ground, and only one single road that has now been interdicted between Andrivka and Pokrovsk. So I have never seen a battlefield so mismanaged. Maybe you could say the Syrian Arab Army recently was a pretty mismanaged battlefield, but that wasn't really a battlefield. This is unbelievable. We're looking at failure to retreat when necessary, failure to shore up lines, failure to build fortifications, failure in mobilization, failure in training, and incompetence in leadership that seems to be systemic now. So it's pretty horrible. All right, here in the middle of the area towards Olenivka, the Russians have just made a small advance, another small advance here by Ziora. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, guys, because there's so many of these small advances now. Small advance out of Sanivka. Again, another advance through Kurakhove. They have captured the grain elevator area along the shore here. They've also pushed into the hospital area and have captured all of the high-rise. So all that remains now is this industrial area. It's not really so much the encirclement of Kurakhove anymore, rather the encirclement of the fortifications just to the south and the industrial area itself. Excuse me. Down here along Uspenivka and along the Sukyali River, Russian forces have captured the village entirely. They've captured this fortification, and everything basically to the south of the Sukyali River is now under Russian control. This is again very bad because all of the fortifications in this area are along this river. So the front line is now on the fortifications. Nothing is going to hold this area. As we can see, the Russians are already very close to the road and have it interdicted with fire and FPV drones and artillery and mortars. So this is a very, very bad encirclement, and it only gets worse as the Russians have advanced into Zelenivka here and are very quickly approaching the Andrivka conglomerate of villages. And a specific thing that I've talked about a lot of times is that, as I said, Pokrovsk, Kurakhove, and Velyka Novosilka are now the remaining defensive points along this defense line. After this falls, we'll just make a line here. We'll say that the Russians capture something like this here soon, because this is about to happen. We'll make it purple and make it big. Okay, so when this happens, we're already talking about the Ukrainians not having any defenses back here. There are no defenses in this area. And the only other thing that the Ukrainians can supplement for pre-built fortifications is dense urban areas that can be used for solid defense. So once the Ukrainians back out of Kurakhove, let's look at what they have as options. Okay, about 100 houses, and one small warehouse in the middle, and about 200 houses with some small buildings in the middle. Basically, absolutely nothing. These are flat, empty farm villages that don't offer any cover, concealment, safety for supply and logistics. It's just a very, very poor situation. So we're getting very close to a major, major step back for the Ukrainians here. And I will take us down to the final set of updates here, where you can see again that the Ukrainians are in a really, really bad situation. So I had the map like this about 2 weeks ago. The Ukrainians did counterattack to try to push the Russians off this road. They likely pushed them back to this fortified line, although I did not have any geolocations of Ukrainians in Novi Komora on this side of the road. So I didn't know, and I just left it. Turns out the Russians, again, attacked and have secured the 0509 highway along with Novi Komar north of Velyka Novosilka, which, I mean, it was already not being used as a supply line, but it really complicates the situation in Velyka Novosilka now. As well, to the south of Velyka Novosilka, here in Makarivka, there was a claimed encirclement. I didn't see any evidence for this. I feel like some of these encirclements are, some of them are real, like the one in over here in the Vovocha area, right here. I believe that this one was real. The one that was in Hanivka and Vasily High and maybe potentially Uspenivka, that one was real. But this one right here, I was not convinced it was real. It seems like the Russians have already moved past this, and the Ukrainian map deep state was the one that made this claim, is just kind of coping and saying that there are Ukrainians there when there's not. I think that's more of the situation. I'm going to delete this now, but I just wanted to bring it up just because it was a claim that was made. So, all right, just to the north of that, however, Russian forces have captured fortifications in these tree lines right here and have set up another encirclement of Strorozheve, just south of Neshkuchny. God, these names are terrible. And really the most important aspect of this advance is just getting closer to the last remaining logistics line into Velyka Novosilka. This is now a full tactical encirclement. If the Russians can progress another 3 kilometers, which they probably already have pushed out into this next tree line, means that the supply to Velyka Novosilka is entirely cut, and it is then in a physical encirclement. Not a closed physical encirclement, but the only way out is through just dirt fields with no road. So that I would consider that basically an encirclement for this conflict. But yeah, it's not good. And when you're talking about the next defensible position, remember there are no fortifications built here. So we're just gonna take a little trip. We're gonna look all of these villages, kind of the same thing. The Russians are going to just breeze through these guys. I'm telling you, we're getting to the point where there's going to be open roads and motorcycles are going to be hauling ass and causing a lot of chaos back here and forcing the Ukrainians to get off foot. No artillery, that sort of stuff, no drones. So we could be seeing a major step back here for the Ukrainians very soon. Again, another town, no infrastructure, literally no high-rise buildings, a few warehouses, nothing. The next real defensible location would be the mines and terracons and stuff that surround and these high-rise buildings that are in Propasnaya, which, if you look at the map, is quite the trip. Something like 60, 70 kilometers. This is the problem. This is why the Ukrainians held the east for so long, is because there's just nothing back here. There's Mezova. Again, not really particularly that big either. There's nothing real. It's just mostly suburban homes. Just nothing. So Pokrovsk is one of the last major pins in this defensive line, already bypassed by the Russians. Kurakhove was one of the major defensive locations, already bypassed by the Russians to the north and the south. And Velyka Novosilka, the last remaining strong defensive area where there are actual Ukrainian defensive fortifications. Remember, the Russians used to hold this. The Ukrainians pushed down, captured a bunch of fortifications, set up a bunch more fortifications. This area is well fortified, but now the Russians are behind those fortifications again. Velyka Novosilka is in a tactical encirclement, soon to be in a physical encirclement. This is pitiful. This is like, I don't know if you guys play like Hearts of Iron or anything like that, but this is no bueno. This is you are losing Risk very bad. If you're playing Risk right now, you would be like trapped in Australia with your whole army as the Ukrainians. It's sort of the situation. Could the AFU be forced to withdraw behind the Dnieper? Potentially. However, I don't know if you're necessarily going to see that big of a step back. I think that the Ukrainians are going to do sort of the German approach and just hold everything until the very, very, very end, and then surrender. Is kind of how I see this going down. Thank you for your question. All right. Okay, so that's it for the updates, guys. Lots going on, and we should see some major steps forward by the Russians. This entire area will close in the next probably 2 or 3 weeks. We should see this pocket close. Velyka Novosilka brought by the end of January, probably. And I think the Russians will be in New Dachny by New Year's. I think that they're going to push really hard in this direction and try to really cause some chaos back here for the Ukrainians. But yeah. Okay. I was going to show you guys the encirclement map that AMK tweeted. Yeah, here we go. Boom. So here's AMK's circle salience. You can see this was the Novelske pocket. This was the pocket around Krasnohorivka after Krasnohorivka fell that they had to evacuate out of. You can see the pocket that was the Horivka pocket right here. I don't think this pocket exists. I think that this is just a stupid, illogical mapping thing that Syriac and some other mappers do because they don't have a geolocation. So they think that there are Ukrainians somehow holding a single tree line a kilometer deep between two Russian salients. It doesn't make any sense, but it is what it is. You have the salient that was around Antonivka. You had the salient that was around Hanivka. You have the salient around Ugledar. And you have this final salient here. And then obviously the Kurakhove salient. So, yeah, not really the best defensive strategy. Lots of Ukrainians are dying in this region, and being forgotten about is the worst part. So, yeah, it's rough. What if they get Toretsk missiles? I actually was just about to talk about this. So thank you for the amazing segue there. We just got news that Olaf Scholz has failed his. He did not get a vote of confidence. So there will be snap elections in February. To me, this seems like the logical step of overthrowing the people in your alliance that aren't doing specifically what you want them to do. And Olaf Scholz has been dragging his feet for months on sending more equipment, sending Toretsk missiles, stuff that is logical for Germany, but illogical for the Ukraine project, right? And those things have to mesh. So Olaf is getting the boot. The neocons are going to be quite happy. I think that they're going to basically put a puppet in, and that puppet is going to take over support of Ukraine. At least in the short term. I don't know how well that's going to work out, but I am very, very much expecting now that we will see Toretsk missiles in Ukraine at some point. I think that this is the only logical next step because the Ukrainians are surely running out of ATACMS and Storm Shadows at this point, and they need something to continue fighting, something to continue escalating, something to even out the battlefield. I think it's a huge mistake for Germany to do this, but I think Germany is down a path where they're pretty much toast no matter what happens here. So, yeah, it's interesting times, and you can see how if you don't go with the narrative, things aren't going to work out for you. We can hope that somebody gets into office in Germany who's not a Western puppet who's going to do exactly what they say, but in all reality, we are going to see a further escalation of the Ukraine conflict, probably a commandeering of the Ukraine project by the EU states when Trump takes office. And we'll see how that goes. Going to be a lot hotter and a lot more mistakes. But as is life. And we'll see what happens. I think that Germany is about to do something very, very stupid for the future of Germany. But what's new? That seems to be a German habit. Even if the AfD get enough to govern, isn't the leader? I don't know a ton about German politics, but isn't the leader of the AfD super pro war in Ukraine? So, I mean, even if they did win, pretty sure that's exactly the same thing. Koreans and PMC reports. Yeah, there's we get reports of Koreans all the time, but no solid evidence. We got a picture of some Asian guy, which there are hundreds of thousands of Asians in Russia, and a lot of them are not particularly wealthy from the eastern part of the country, and a lot of those guys joined the war because being a soldier is now a very high-paying job in Russia. So, yeah. The AfD is anti-EU and against funding Ukraine. I'm not sure about that. I'm really not 100% sure about that. That sounds wrong to me. Question: heard rumors Ukraine will attack and move into Russia from Chernigov. Is this true? I would say that yes, that is something that I would say is probably going to happen. The East and the South, in particular, are going so bad at this point. I mean, Kramatorsk and Slavyansk aren't going to matter here soon. So the Ukrainians have to do something. I just made a prediction about this, that I think that the Ukrainians are going to try to enter into Russia again or go on the offensive somewhere. They can't do it in the south. The only place it's kind of worked was the north. Do it again. Set back negotiations for another 5 months if they can hope. Occupy some more territory. And if I was the Russians, I would just let them do it. Honestly, I would let them cross. I would let them get into another pocket in a non-substantial area. Let them push in, and then force them to hold it again. I would do the exact same thing. They are getting mollywopped in Kursk. It is atrocious. I have never seen so many videos of Russians walking past dead Ukrainian bodies. And I know the narrative is that the Russians are somehow losing a bunch more men up in this area. It makes no sense at all. The Russians have shorter logistics, more firepower, air defense. So the AfD is not pro-war, Scott. Okay, I could be wrong. Like I said, I'm not an expert. The AfD is anti-war against Russia, but pro-Israel. So they are anti-Russia, which would mean that they're going to do the same thing, right? Scott, do you have big plans for Hanukkah? No, I'm a Christmas guy myself. Doubt Russia would want to take Kiev. FPVs are killing hundreds of Russians per day, dude. What the fuck? Okay. And artillery, glide bombs, and FPVs, which the Russians have more of, are killing thousands of Ukrainians every day. What's the argument here? Nobody's arguing that. Do you think that people don't die in war? Yeah, no, people die. That's what war is. It's why we don't fight them, is because they're bad and a lot of people die and it's a lot of suffering. And what do you mean? It doesn't mean that Russia isn't winning. What are you talking about? Russian losses are far bigger. Oh, we got one of these guys in here. That's the point. Okay, well, yeah, if you're going to listen to the Ukrainian government for your source of information, for sure, bro. Cool. Yep. Maybe 1 to 1.5. Nah, what? 1 to 1.5 what? Please say something so stupid so I can just laugh. I just need a laugh right now. Give it to me. Come on, let's go. Come on, Alonzo. 1 Ukraine per 1.5 Russians. Oh, okay. I thought you meant 1.5 million. I was like, holy God. Question. Your views on Israel taking more territory in Syria? What did you expect? This is what I was saying. Bashar al-Assad is not a good guy, right? He's not necessarily the person that you want there. He's done bad things. We can all agree on that. But Bashar al-Assad was stability and secularism in Syria. If you're a Muslim, you might not like that. I think that keeping women's hair out is a good thing. I think that, you know, that sort of stuff is good by me. So I preferred Assad just in the sense that he was stability, and that I mean, even if you're a pro-Kurdish individual, pro-U.S., this is not really a good thing for the U.S. Now the U.S. has no real reason to be in Syria, which I guess is a good thing. But when you're talking about geostrategically in a time when you're engaged in multiple proxy wars and you're fighting a hybrid war, you want to maintain your positions. You don't want to be losing positions. Now the U.S. will likely lose its positions in Syria as the Turkish begin to, go after SDF. So the Kurds are getting screwed again. Everybody knew it. I've been telling you guys that for years that was going to happen. The United States is likely going to be removed from Syria, and because there's no more Iranian presence, right? That's part of the whole thing. And the Kurds are going to get rocked, and then you have a Muslim pit, which nothing wrong with the Muslim part, but you know, there are plenty of great places in the world that are Muslim majority. But the issue is the extremism is going to just be rampant, and it's just going to become a pit. Syria is no longer a state. Syria is just a region, and the Israelis are taking a full advantage of that. If I was the Israelis, I'd go all the way. What's stopping you from doing exactly what you want to do? It's what I've been talking about for forever. And the hypocrisy of being mad at Russian imperialism and then watching Israel just walk into multiple different countries and do whatever they want and kill hundreds of thousands of civilians, or, 100,000 civilians, whatever you want to say, in southern Lebanon, in Syria, in Gaza. That's crazy. That's crazy, but it is what it is, right? There's nothing to be... Yeah. Syria has become Libya 2.0. And then Libya is now likely going to become the new Syria, where Russia puts a lot of its investment. A lot of the equipment from Syria is headed to Libya. So let's see. 1 to 8 casualties in favor. Yeah, no, I don't think it's that high. I think it's something closer to 1 to 3. All you have to do is look at the weapons advantage. The Russians have an artillery advantage. They have an aviation advantage. They have a drone advantage. Not only do they have an FPV advantage, they have a Lancet advantage. They have, all of the different methods that they use. They have missile advantage. They can use Iskanders whenever they wish. They use KH-59 and KH-69 missiles fired by Su-57s frequently all over the battlefield. So there's constant work going on, and it just outnumbers the Ukrainians so significantly. I believe that the Russian military inside of Ukraine is now actually bigger than the Ukrainian military, which I think happened a couple months ago for the first time. But no, the situation is much worse for Ukraine. I don't really know, Alonzo, where you're getting your sourcing and information from. I think what is happening, and this is what happens to a lot of people, is they see a few dudes get blown up by grenade drops or FPVs. Let's say they see a few thousand. I've probably seen 20,000 Ukrainians get blown to pieces myself with my own eyes, which is horrific. And I think about the toll that that's going to take on me in life. But you see that stuff and you think, oh man, their losses just must be catastrophic. But when you say things like, and I know you didn't say this, but the Ukrainian government says the Russians have lost 600,000 people killed, that's ridiculous. That is a ridiculous number, and you would have to show some evidence of that. And it's easy to believe those numbers when you're not used to watching people get destroyed and you're watching human beings get destroyed, right? It's very overwhelming to the psyche, and it's hard to actually properly analyze what's happening on the ground. You just go with the odds and do the math, right? Who has more firepower? Who's firing more shells? Who's lobbing more bombs? Who's firing more missiles? Who's launching more drones? Russia, 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 Russia. That's all you need to know. I think that the Russians are between 100 and 200 KIA. I think are 100 and 200,000 KIA. I think the Ukrainians are somewhere in the 500,000 range. I think that's very apparent from just their own demographic reports. And I mean, they've lost. You want to talk about what they've lost to Europe and Russia in terms of people? Millions, right? They lost millions of people into Europe and into Russia. So that's way more significant. But the casualties are much, much higher for the Ukrainians. I'm sorry, friend. How tall are you? I'm 6'4". You would see bodies in mass. You would see massive graveyards like we see in Ukraine. You don't see massive military cemeteries expanding daily like you do in Ukraine, in Russia. You just don't see it. The Mediazona, the open source reporting of Russian obituaries would be much, much higher than it is. The math isn't mathing. That's the biggest problem. Do you trust anything Zelensky says? No. It is very sad. It is very sad, Barry. Let's see. Do you think the West is delaying the inevitable, hoping that Ukraine is going to fall? That if Ukraine is going to fall, it's going to fall under Trump's watch. Is that the goal? Well, I mean, if you're a Democrat and this is your project, yes, you want this to fall on Trump, right? Do you want it to fail? No. Do you think it's probably going to fail? Likely. Are you still scrapping and trying to figure out a way out of it? Absolutely. I'm now under the impression that a European military force might actually enter into Ukraine if things get that bad, because I don't think Europe can actually stand to have the Ukraine project go wrong. 6'4" in heels? No, I'm 6'4", dude. I actually I'll get a picture for you guys maybe one day, but no, I'm tall. I'm super tall. And it sucks. My back hurts all the time. So it's not the blessing you guys think it is. All right. Do I have anything else for you guys? Yeah, nope. There was just that general that was killed in Moscow by the IED explosion. That's exactly what you guys are going to see. You're just going to see more and more of that. Expect a lot of it over the next 30 days. I think they're going to put every card that they have up their sleeves in. They're going to play them all. So, FAB attacks reduced dramatically. Yes, they did. Drastically. Do you know why? Lancet strikes also dramatically reduced. Can you guys take a guess? Here, I'll take us over to the map and we can figure it out as a team. Okay. The reason why the Russians are not firing as many bombs is because they are through all of this. They are through all of this. This front line does not require bombing anymore. There is no, their bombs will fall on these kind of places right here, these fortified areas, but there is no reason to drop bombs in this area. It just doesn't. Artillery will do the trick. FPVs will do the trick. The Russians are past where they are on the offensive. Oh, did my camera go out? No, it didn't. Where the Russians are on the offensive, they are not needing to bomb in the same density. Also, the Ukrainian lines are thinning out significantly. Armor is less prevalent. Vehicles are less prevalent. So Lancets are just, flying around doing not a lot, right? You haven't seen nearly as many Lancet strikes, nearly as many bombings. And yet the Russians are capturing more territory than ever before. So when I say things like the math isn't mathing, that's exactly what I'm talking about. The Russian territorial expansion has improved so significantly since the drop-off of bombs and Lancets. Common sense and logic, everybody. Hmm. All right, if you guys have any questions, get them in. Get them in, get them in, get them in. And we're getting close to wrapping this one up. Are you talking about me? Zimini? I'm on. Can the US pardon Russia? I don't know what you mean by that. Like a presidential pardon? Nope. I don't know what you mean by that. Ask a follow-up question so I understand. What will happen when the EU army enters Ukraine? See, I don't know if they're actually going to, but there's so much talk around it right now. It's like they're so desperate they don't know what to do. I would pay good money to see British, French troops, German troops be deployed into Ukraine. That would be such a titanic disaster logistically, in terms of the domestic situation, that nobody in France, Britain, or Germany is going to go for that. Nobody. It would be such a calamity that I kind of want it to happen just to show everybody what the reality is, because there's still this myth of Western military invincibility, and Europe is a complete joke. Europe is a joke, and it's going to show very, very clear. Even if they're not on the front line, even if they're in rear positions, you're going to see these problems that are going to be reported on, and you're going to be like, how are they messing up when they're not even fighting? It's going to be, why is Alonzo such a whiny bitch? Hey, everybody's allowed to have their opinions, right? You could be wrong. As long as he's being decent and nice, I have no problem with somebody speaking their mind in here. I might make fun of them if they say something incredibly stupid, but I don't think he's being a whiny bitch. I think he's just arguing something that he believes in, and that's fine. It's good, and you should take it as a challenge. You should, every time somebody has an opposing idea to you and you believe your idea is right, you should confront that, at least in your brain, and you should try to figure out what perspective that person is coming from, why they may think the things that they do, and then either advance your ability to debate or change your ideas based off of new information. That's how I do it personally. Renewed Russian push towards Kherson. Yes, I would think that is a very real possibility. I'm doing okay, but I appreciate it. Do I anticipate another Orshnik strike? No. No. Maybe, but no. I would say that would be a complete waste of an a medium range ICBM, or medium range ballistic missile. I don't think that's a good idea. I say the better idea would be just load up a bunch of MiGs, a bunch of Iskanders, and take out some very vital infrastructure. Like, actually do the final blow to the nuclear plants, reduce the power to a point where they are actively focusing on that instead of the war, and then end this. But I think the Russians are really waiting until the right moment to do that, because they don't want, it's like, you don't want everybody starving in the country, right? You don't want to kill a bunch of Ukrainian civilians in the middle of winter. That's not the Russian goal, especially if Russia has to control all of this territory eventually, up to the river, all the way, whatever, however it ends, right? What are they going to be living with? This is the part of the nation building, right? The US does a really good job of going in and overthrowing regimes, and then everybody hates them there and wants them to leave for 20 years. That's not what the Russians are seeking to do. This is going to be a permanent part of the Russian state. And if you destroy the population and make them hate you, as you were like, I am now your leader, it doesn't work out, right? So hit the power plants when you are confident that it will take out the government and that you can move in, quickly repair those power plants, and get power back to the people. That's what I would say. I already read that one. What do you think about Russian tank production? I heard pre-war 30 and now 120 a month, brand new. Do you think they will ramp it up? I think that the Russians will keep it exactly at maintenance level, and then they will keep it at maintenance level for like 3 years after the war. And you're going to see a continued high amount of spending, and they're going to replenish all of those stocks. That's my personal prediction. In terms of numbers, we only can just go off of like rumors because the Russian military is not releasing those numbers. What is your day job? I don't have a day job. I do a little of this, a little of that. I wander, I loiter. I go from town to town. That's sort of what I do. It's a good life. Wholesome. Scott, care to guess whether you think the AFU will choose to defend Kharkova power station to the end or withdraw soon? I don't really think they have much of a choice. I think that they're already kind of stuck. But if I had to take a guess, I'd say that they're probably going to try to get out through these fields here pretty soon because the situation is getting very bad, and there's almost no point in defending this anymore. It's not going to do much for them here very, very soon. As soon as the Russians cross down here or end up cutting this highway, this all is over. So, I mean, they're very close already. La la la, looking for questions. You guys are all talking to each other. I'm reading through all kinds of stuff. Europe really wanted to speed up the Judgment Day endgame for Ukraine. My prediction has always been that the best ending for Ukraine, I mean, for the EU and for the United States, is Russia just basically fighting their whole way through and causing as much damage to Russia, and then Ukraine not existing. Because if Ukraine exists, it's going to be a state that needs constant funding, and that's just not. That's not what the EU wants right now. Russia going into winter quarters. I don't know what that means. Like their housing. I don't know what that means. Your guys' arguments are funny sometimes. All right. That's where I'm going to wrap it up, guys. Thank you for watching today. Episode 124 of Kalibrated Live has been brought to you by Shut the Hell Up. We don't have sponsors here. Please go follow me and support me wherever you can. Give this video a like, a thumbs up, a star, a check, whatever you damn well please. I appreciate all of you being in here, and I will see you on Friday. Friday is my next live stream, and it will not be moved. Friday. I will see you then. Goodbye, guys.